Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P. Joe Pizzapia. With me today is Kyle Yates and Andrew Erickson, and today we're going to start looking ahead already, if you can believe it, into 2022 rankings. We're going to start with the wide receivers because those boys are dominating the gridiron, and we are going to also chat a little bit about the GOAT, who is now officially retired, even though in his statement he didn't use the word retired, but still, we're thinking it's over, we're thinking it's done, and we're going to look back real quick at an astounding career, and I can't think of a better person to be here with discussing this than Andrew Erickson, who has not known another quarterback in his lifetime besides Tom Brady. In kindergarten, Tom Brady took over for Andrew Erickson, and that's all he's known, basically, for his entire life. So, Andrew, what's football going to be for you without Tom Brady going forward?
It was actually first grade, so come on.
I'm sorry.
Get it right, man. In 2001.
You skipped the grade? Were you really good at finger painting? Is that what happened?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
But, no, it's weird. A Tom Brady era that we're now in, post-Tom Brady era. It's crazy to think that he's playing for so long, 22 years, 20 years in New England, these last 2 years in Tampa Bay, and it's surreal. All these were quarterbacks, the golden age, or kind of this second wind of golden age quarterbacks is all gone. And luckily we have a really great young crop of quarterbacks that are kind of now, continuing the fire, continuing the flames with them playing in the NFL right now. So I'm excited about the new crop of quarterbacks, and I'm excited for someone else to start, a dynasty. It's just been Tom Brady. I think the stat that was thrown out, it was Tom Brady, the Manning brothers, Roethlisberger, and the 49ers quarterbacks. Have been in all the championship games the past 20 years. So it'll be interesting to see, which quarterback can win multiple Super Bowls. Because that's kind of always been the barometer of, you can win one, that's a really great accomplishment, but who's going to win multiple? And because Brady's won so many that it was hard for another quarterback to win more than one Super Bowl. So it'll be interesting to see how things kind of shake out. I mean, Mahomes has obviously been one that's been to multiple Super Bowls, but he still only has that one. He's been close, but has come up short in recent years.
Do you have a favorite Tom Brady memory, Andrew Erickson?
Yeah, so I thought long and hard about this. I was really trying to epitomize, what it was like to be a Patriots fan. I'm not going to go to Super Bowls or anything like that because there's too many. You just can't pick out one. I love them all.
Boy, that sounds obnoxious to non-Patriots fans. I just want to point that out.
But one memory that sticks out in my mind, and this isn't even from the 2007 season where they just basically pummeled teams. I think this was just some one-off game. I think it's either 2009 or 2010, and it was the Patriots against the Tennessee Titans, and they won that game 59-0. Tom Brady threw 5 touchdowns in the second quarter. In one quarter, he threw 5 touchdowns, and I'm just it was so weird. It was like a snowy game in October, so bizarre, and you have this guy just throwing 5 touchdowns in one quarter of football. Just absolutely crazy. Just one of the other, mind-blowing stats that Tom Brady has, along with his, hundreds of others. But just want to share that one that maybe you don't know about. It's a little bit under the radar.
Yeah, I mean, the completion percentage one, it's just compared to championship appearances, it's just the craziest thing I've ever heard. For me, I was a Patriots fan before Tom Brady, so I was back in the Drew Bledsoe days, still got the Bledsoe jersey hanging up in the closet to prove it. But for me, the quintessential Brady moment is that comeback in the Super Bowl against Atlanta. To me, that was the one where even if you hated the Patriots, you hated Tom Brady, you had to sit back and just go, oh my God. And I was watching that game with a house full of people, some of my friends, one of which was a big Patriots fan too, and we lost our minds. I mean, we literally completely lost our minds for the second half of that game and then the overtime, and it was just an amazing thing to watch. And that lack of quit that's just ingrained in him, and you could tell by the way everybody who played with Tom Brady talks about him. And I understand that people had Brady fatigue, but man, Yates, this guy's leaving on a high note, leading the league in passing, for God's sakes, coming within just maybe a minute basically of going to another championship game after another stunning comeback there against the Rams. It just fell a little bit short. What's your lasting memory of Tom Brady as he rides off into the sunset?
It's just so ridiculous because I think that we have gotten so sedated to the fact of Tom Brady just dominating the NFL for 20 plus years. That is just, I remember thinking, I'm originally from Chicago. I'm a big hockey fan. So when the Blackhawks were winning Stanley Cups in the 2010s, right? They won 2010, 2013, and 2015. I remember thinking in 2015 that I wasn't going to be able to go to the championship parade, but I remember having the thought of, that's okay. I'll go next year. Like, I remember having that thought, and now looking back on it, thinking that that was so ridiculous to have that thought. But Patriots fans have, and now the Bucks fans have had that for so long with Tom Brady, because when Brady was behind center, you truly were championship or bust. Like, you were always going to be competing for a championship with him behind center. So Andrew, you talked about it. That was one of the things I was going to mention. Like, it's amazing now that we've got Big Ben retiring. We've got these older quarterbacks that are now on their way out, that were dominant for so long, even going back to Philip Rivers a couple of years ago. Like, all these guys are now starting to exit the league. And then we look at the AFC quarterbacks, and who I put out a tweet a couple weeks ago about the AFC quarterbacks and their ages. It's ridiculous. We're going to have this next wave of young quarterbacks be utterly dominant for the next several years. It's going to be must-watch football. I cannot wait to see how these guys and who continues to emerge. But I will say this, no one is ever going to be able to replicate what Tom Brady did with his utter dominance. We're just never going to see it again.
Also, no one's going to defer money like he did. I just want to point that out there. These guys all get paid now. I mean, Tom Brady, year after year, used to take pay cuts so they could go ahead and put rosters out there because he wanted to win. I don't think that's something you're going to see guys do. Maybe later in their career they might, but I don't think you're going to see that for a while. And it's something that people wonder, why are they always so good? Well, that's part of it, because there was a little bit of self-sacrifice there for Tom Brady, because at the end of the day, for him, it was all about winning. And we wish Tom Brady all the best. This is certainly a career you look back on and just marvel at. And yeah, I think you nailed it, Yates, which is basically you're kind of almost numb to the greatness. And I think in a year or two, we'll sit back and go, did that really happen? Do you really see one guy do this and dominate the National Football League in the salary cap era for that length of time and with more than one team? An incredible career, that is absolutely sure. And he is the GOAT. I'm sorry, everybody. The conversation's over. It's done. But the conversation is just beginning here when we look ahead to wide receivers. And before we jump ahead to 2022, I want to tell everybody, go to bettingpros.com/squares right now, because everybody loves a good Super Bowl square, whether it's in your office, your family, whether it's your friends, your frenemies, your enemies, it doesn't matter. People love the Super Bowl squares, and our sports betting site, bettingpros.com, now has its own Super Bowl squares game. So go over to bettingpros.com/squares and create your free board for the big game, and the squares automatically get assigned, and our scoring will update during the game to show who the winners are after each quarter. It's very exciting stuff. It does it all for you. And guess what? It's free. Oh my God, it doesn't get better than that. So get everybody involved. Have some fun this Super Bowl Sunday coming up, and go to bettingpros.com/squares. Also, we got some great offers from DraftKings and FanDuel going on right now. Both have amazing offers where new customers can bet $5 on either team playing the Super Bowl to win $280. It may sound too good to be true, but I'm telling you right now, it absolutely is true. There's no catch. You really should take advantage of this offer while you can. On FanDuel, the $280 earnings will be withdrawable cash, so you'll definitely want to check that out. And to redeem these new offers, new FanDuel customers can go to FanDuel.com/FPros, and new DraftKings customers can download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use that today. So, gentlemen, we're going to start today with the wide receiver ranks. We're going to go a little grouping at a time, compare Andrew's to Yates's to mine, and we're going to start from 24 and go to 19. But before we even get there, I want to ask you guys, who didn't crack wide receiver 2 for you that you really, in your gut, in your soul, deep down, wanted to put there, but you just couldn't get there, at least not in February? Andrew, who is that name for you that you wanted to put in wide receiver 2, crack the top 24, but fell just a little short?
My wide receiver 26, Hunter Renfrow, is the wide receiver that I had. I mean, he just went on an epic tear towards the end of the season. You know, very, very consistent. Derek Carr's go-to wide receiver, but I just ultimately liked a lot of the receivers ahead of him, which is why he fell to wide receiver 26 in my rankings. But I mean, I can't argue with anyone that would have him ranked as a wide receiver 2, because that's what he was last year. He was a borderline wide receiver 1 towards the end of the season. Now we have a new offensive coach coming in, and Josh McDaniels to the Raiders. We'll see how that kind of shakes things up. But I mean, there really aren't that many established pass catchers in that offense. Zay Jones is a free agent, so he could potentially leave, making Renfrow more of a focal point. Obviously, Darren Waller, you hope, will be healthy. How does that affect Hunter Renfrow going forward? And I think Renfrow is just one of those guys, too, that, you know, rankings and ADP are a little bit different. And I just don't think that Renfro's ever going to get steamed up in ADP, where I don't necessarily need to rank him aggressively to also say, hey, like, I have him ranked here, but you know that his upside is a little bit higher than that, and you can still draft him where he's going at ADP, because he's just not a player that gets steamed up. He's not this sexy rookie wide receiver, second-year player like a Gabriel Davis, who's surely going to just skyrocket up ADPs. Henry Renfrow doesn't fall in that category, even though he just produces.
Yates, how about you? Who just missed the top 24 for you that you really wish you could have put in there?
We're gonna have some disagreements on this show because Hunter
Oh,
Renfrow is way higher in my rankings than 26. For me, DJ Moore. DJ Moore is sitting there right at 25. So it's splitting hairs here, but this is one that I really had a tough time with because looking at some of the other names that are higher on this list with DJ Moore, it's who's the quarterback? Who's the quarterback with DJ Moore? Because we saw him get out to a just dominant start to the season and then just absolutely sputter when we had the rotation of Cam Newton, Sam Darnold came back, PJ Walker in and out of the lineup. Like we need that quarterback here in Carolina for DJ Moore to be a locked in top 20 play. And I just don't have that clarity yet. So if we do get one of those veteran quarterbacks coming to Carolina, we get the upgrade there. If they go Kenny Pickett in the NFL draft, whatever the case may be, then that will be where DJ Moore moves back up into top 15 range because he's got the talent. It's never been a question about talent, just a matter of with DJ Moore, who's the quarterback. So he was one that's right on that edge, but I had a tough time with.
There's going to be a lot of battles because you've got 3 guys outside the top 24 Yates and I have inside of my top 24. So I can't wait to get going with this. For me, it's Calvin Ridley just because I don't have clarity, as you were saying. It's that lack of clarity right now. Where is he going to play? Is he going to play? I just can't put him in the top 24 yet. He is right outside of it right now at 28 for me. But in terms of talent, there's no doubt he's much closer to 12 than he is 24. It's just a matter of the circumstance and needing more clarity with that. So, Andrew, here are your number 24 through 19 guys. Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, Elijah Moore, Michael Pittman Jr., Michael Thomas, and DeAndre Hopkins. Now, speaking of lack of clarity, I don't know who the quarterback is with the Saints. I don't know if Michael Thomas ever wants to play for the Saints again. Where do you get off putting Michael Thomas in the top 20, Andrew Erickson? Talk to me about this.
I mean, because I look at his body of work. And look, this is something that's really important to remember. We talked about on the Takeaway show is having a player with the ability to be the wide receiver one matters. Like the fact that Michael Thomas has shown at the NFL level that he can be the best wide receiver in fantasy football is something that you don't want to forget about. Yes, I know the injuries have obviously plagued him in recent years as long as the quarterback play. But, you look back, Cooper Kupp a couple years ago, he was a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. And then he had kind of 1 year, he got hurt, subpar year with subpar quarterback play. And we all kind of forgot about him a little bit. And then, oh, wow, quarterback upgrade, boom, wide receiver one, back in action. Like Michael Thomas still isn't that old in comparison to, being an alpha receiver at the NFL level. So I just still think that I'm going to want to be in on Michael Thomas this season because he's just going to be cheaper. So I want to be out in front of his ranking early on. And then obviously, depending on how ADP shakes out, I can obviously maneuver him a little bit more. But I'm going to be advocating to draft Michael Thomas, assuming that he is healthy this year.
All right. So you made a good argument there for Michael Thomas. I want to ask you then about DeAndre Hopkins. And now I want you to explain yourself in a different way because I'm not ready to bump DeAndre Hopkins all the way down where you have him at 19. So is it just this 1 year injury? Is it the age? Like, what is it right now for DeAndre Hopkins that has you knocking him all the way down here after one down year?
Well, I mean, is it really? I mean, I don't know if it's really one down year necessarily. I mean, he's always been a target hog. That's what he's
Well,
been
he was
done.
pretty good 2 years ago. I think 2020 was a good season for DeAndre Hopkins.
That's fair. But I guess for me, it's like even when he played this season, when he was healthy, he wasn't that good. Like he wasn't good when he was on the field. Like he wasn't commanding targets at a high rate that he usually does every single season. Where are we standing with this Cardinals offense? Like, I mean, Kyler Murray comes out the gates on fire every single year, and then they just fall off every single season. So, we saw Hopkins now play with more competition. That's what I thought was originally going to happen when he first went to Arizona. That ended up not being the case. The second year in Arizona, they started to spread the ball out more. They used more of Christian Kirk. They used AJ Green. They used these other guys, Zach Ertz. They use more of the other ancillary pieces in a more traditional way of the air raid offense as opposed to, like just hammer targets towards DeAndre Hopkins. And it looked really effective early on because they were winning a lot of games. But then Hopkins obviously got hurt. He fell off and he wasn't as effective. And I just look at the receipt again. It goes back to the guys I have ranked ahead of him. I just like a lot of those players more. Now, if his ADP falls to a point where you can't pass up on him, I mean, I still have him ranked ahead of Michael Thomas. So I kind of view them a little bit similarly, but I would opt for DeAndre Hopkins instead. But Thomas might just end up being just so much cheaper that I'll just opt for a more cheaper veteran coming off a down season.
Now, look, I can understand being a little concerned with the age of Hopkins, but in 2020, 1,400 yards, 115 receptions, and 6 touchdowns. I think that's a pretty good year, Andrew. I'm going to give him a pass, kind of, sort of. I'm with you. I'm not putting him in the top 5 group anymore. But 20, that is definitely tough. I do like that you've got a couple other guys here in this range too, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, who I think we all deem as kind of safe but lack upside, especially with quarterback situations in flux. Makes a ton of sense. I like that you have Elijah Moore where you have him. I have him at 23. He's in my top grouping as well. So a pretty good group there from you here from 24 to 19. Counting down Kyle Yates is, of course, he is right there too with his usual suspects. Of course, Kyle Yates always has. He got Robert Woods, then Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Lockett, and Michael Pittman Jr. Let's talk about Pittman. You've got him at 19. Andrew has him at 21. This is one of your favorites. Now, last year, Pittman had some moments, but then all of a sudden they started to get fewer and far between. And so basically there was this middle of the season where Pittman seemed to be going in the right track. Can he get back on that track and sustain it for an entire season in 2022?
So here we have to say this at the onset, like these rankings are going to be drastically different in July and
You're
August.
Not allowed to change them at all. Nope. This is it. You've locked them in. They will now be here until September 1st, period.
So with Pittman, we have a lot that has to play out, right? Is Carson Wentz going to be the quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts next year? That's a major question mark. Are they going to invest in the wide receiver position around him, right? Is T.Y. Hilton and Paris Campbell, are they both back? Is Paris Campbell going to be healthy and having a more advanced role in the offense? Do they draft someone? Do they bring someone in free agency? There's a lot there that still has to be played out. But with Pittman, we've seen the opportunity and we've seen the talent. So we know that it's there. The potential is there. The part that I'm really interested in with Pittman is that looking at Jonathan Taylor's red zone production, his red zone opportunity, it was just far and away the highest in the NFL. And so if we say that that number comes down a little bit next year and those targets start to go back to Michael Pittman Jr., I remember saying on a rest of season risers and fallers show about like 4 or 5 weeks into the season that Michael Pittman Jr. was towards the top of the league in red zone targets, in end zone targets. Like if that comes back this next year to at least a little bit more towards the norm, like what it was at the beginning of the season, we could really see Michael Pittman Jr. not just be a top 20 guy, but potentially even a top 10.
Talk to me about Robert Woods, who you've got just cracking that 24. Obviously, the injury this year derailed him. Slow start, but then he really started to pick things up there before the injury. Are you ready to just go right back to the Robert Woods? Well, I know he's one of your favorite guys, very steady. So if Odell Beckham should somehow end up again with the Rams, does that change the equation for you with Woods?
It does. So with Robert Woods, I wanted to put him here at 24, so that way we would talk about him. Because I think with Robert Woods, I don't want to forget about him going into next year, and especially coming off of this year, because I think a lot of people are going to have the taste in their mouth about what Robert Woods did at the beginning of the season. They're not really going to remember that once he started to get back involved in the offense, once they remembered, oh, hey, we have this Robert Woods guy. He's actually pretty good. We should throw him the ball, that he was producing really, really solid numbers from a fantasy perspective. So this is assuming that Odell Beckham Jr. is not back in LA because just from cap purposes, I wonder if he's going to go somewhere else or if he takes a discount deal. Again, these will shift and change. But I wanted to include Robert Woods in the top 24 discussion because I wanted to make sure that we do not forget that he was incredibly solid and reliable just because, and if we have Cooper Kupp come back down to earth just a little bit next year, then some of that opportunity is going to go Robert Woods' way. So that was just the purpose of it. Get him inside the top 24 so we make sure that we talk about him here. He's someone that I will be targeting next year because like Andrew said, I don't think that ADP is going to be, really high.
One more I want to touch on, Tyler Lockett, who you've got all the way down to 20, and I would assume that Andrew has higher, and I know I do as well. Any reason why he is as low as he is right now? Is that because of the tenuous situation of Russell Wilson being quarterback of the Seahawks next year?
I actually thought that 20 was high for Tyler Lockett. So I think with Lockett, there's a lot in flux with the Russell Wilson situation. We don't know if Wilson is going to be back next year. And even if he is, it's not like this offense was great last year. Like Tyler Lockett had his moments, but it wasn't necessarily something where I want to say that this is a top 12 guy or anything like that. So there's a lot in flux there with Lockett. A lot needs to be played out. But even if it is next year, he was someone that I was avoiding this year anyway, and it made me look really bad the first 2 weeks of the season. You guys remember that? Oh, yeah. Tyler Lockett came out on fire and then started to form back into Tyler Lockett fashion there. So that's just someone that I actually think 20 is pretty high because of all the volatility there. We have no idea who the quarterback is going to be for Seattle next season.
Well, I agree because I've got him at 19. So you and I see eye to eye. We'll see where Andrew has him coming up soon. For me, starting at 24, Hunter Renfro, because I respect the little man. That's right. Being shorter myself, I have a lot of respect for Hunter Renfro. He is steady. He is solid. He cracks the top 24 just barely. Elijah Moore. I think the sky's the limit for this guy. I think he's going to be the one in this offense next year without a doubt. Darnell Mooney's at 22 for me. I have big plans for Justin Fields in 2022. So get ready, boys and girls. I'm just talking about it now, so it begins. Terry McLaurin is next at 21, then Amon-Ra St. Brown at 20, because I care very much about the end of that season, and I like this player going into last year, and then Tyler Lockett at 19. So I've got Amon-Ra St. Brown at 20. Yates, he didn't make your top 24. And Andrew, I don't see him anywhere for you unless you put him, at number 1 overall, which you did not. So we need to have a discussion here. How is the old guy on the show all of a sudden give so much respect to guys like Elijah Moore, all the young kids? I thought you guys was with the youth blood of this show, and it turns out to be me, Joey P. Andrew Erickson, where do you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, and why don't you respect him?
Hey man, these are work in progress rankings. So I have I have him at wide receiver 33, and right now it's tough because you can see the optimistic side of a lot of these guys when you're ranking them. Like, oh, like I gotta rank this guy higher, I gotta rank this guy higher, but like someone has to go in front of the other guy. So for me, I have him at wide receiver 33, and I mean I like him a lot still. Like I feel bad that I have to rank him there, but the end of season production was obviously top tier, but something that I kind of picked up on when I was just doing my research this past season was really looking at offenses as a whole versus just chasing, target volume with wide receivers.
Sure. And that's fair. That's fair. But the volume, I mean, week 13, I'm going to start
You
there.
have to remember
12
that
targets,
TJ
12.
Hawkinson.
I know, but TJ Hawkinson isn't Travis Kelce. He's a nice tight end. He's a good player. But 12, 12, 11, 11, 11, 10. Yates. I mean, where do you have Amon-Ra St. Brown compared to Andrew?
I have him at 28, and
Okay.
the reasoning
I'm the
for this
hater.
is that
You are the hater. Oh my
The
God,
reasoning
you
for this is that I
curmudgeon.
expect a lot to change here going into next year with Detroit. Not only are they going to get DeAndre Swift back, they're going to get TJ Hawkinson back, who were both out over that for a significant stretch of that dominance from Amon-Ra St. Brown. But then also they've got to do something else at the wide receiver position, whether that's in the draft, whether that's through free agency. They can't go into next year with just Josh Reynolds and Kadero Hodge, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're going to have to bring in someone else. So I think that it's going to be a matter of we're going to not necessarily have the same level of target totals that we had from Amon-Ra St. Brown this next year. He's going to provide a very safe floor. He's an incredibly talented wide receiver. I was all in on Amon-Ra St. Brown coming into the year. It didn't work out at the beginning of the year.
No,
Did
me
at the
too,
end.
and it did
But
not.
I think
agree.
that with Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's something where we look at the situation and it's going to change. There's a lot that still has to play out. So I'm saying that he is a high-end wide receiver 3 versus someone that I still want. I still want guys like Robert Woods, Amari Cooper over Amon-Ra St. Brown because of the upside that they bring in their respective offenses and the things that could change there versus Detroit, who is not going to immediately change and be a top 5 offense next year.
Oh, and look, it is not lost on me. We had a great conversation with Matt Harmon last week on the show about offensive ecosystems, and that is very important. But I think they found something in Amon-Ra St. Brown. I do not think it's a fluke. It was too long of a streak. I don't care if it's TJ Hawkinson. I don't care if it's TJ Maxx. I don't care if it's Max Williams. Whoever it is they bring in there at tight end again for this year. I don't care. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is here to stay. And I will say this. I can't wait. Let's get that mock draft wizard up right now. I want to do mocks with you guys because I know I'm going to get Amon-Ra St. Brown around sooner than you guys will even reach for him. So that makes me happy already. Let's go to numbers 18 through 13 on the wide receiver list of the rankings for 2022. Andrew at number 23 has Chris Godwin, followed by Mike Evans. Then we have Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Lockett, Jalen Waddle, and T. Higgins there at 13. So talk to me about this group here, Andrew. A very solid group here. T. Higgins, Waddle, 2 guys who are very solid in terms of what you're getting out of them at wide receiver position, I feel like, on a weekly basis. And then Mike Evans and Godwin. So obviously these guys have taken a hit because of the recent situation in Tampa, correct?
Yeah, I mean they were ranked higher, a week ago pretty much, but once Brady decided to retire again, Mike Evans has obviously been a proven commodity, basically whoever his quarterback was. So whether it was Jameis, who was good for fantasy, Mike Evans produced, and even before that, I don't remember. Did they have Mike Glennon as their quarterback? Was he the guy? Like, I mean, I don't even remember who Mike Evans like had as a quarterback before Jameis Winston, but Mike Evans always
Trying to
finds a way
remember.
to get it
Glennon
done.
was definitely there for a hot
Glennon
minute.
in
Josh McCown
Chicago,
was
but
there
then
also for a
Oh,
year. I recall
McCown.
Josh McCown
I thought
also.
Glennon was there too.
He
Man.
was for a hot
Okay.
minute. I don't know how much he played, but he was definitely there. For sure.
all right, I'm looking that up because you got me curious now. Keep going. Keep
Okay.
going.
So, I mean, Mike Evans, I'm very interested to see how the market shakes out on him because it's the old, okay, well, Brady's gone. All right. So efficiency is going to get hurt. Oh, but now he's going to get all the targets. Okay. So, how does that change where he gets drafted? Does he just not change where he gets drafted? Like, is he like a 3rd round pick like he was last year just because, oh, well, he'll make up for lack of efficiency with the volume? Okay. I can buy that narrative. But, as we talked about earlier, it's like, no, like you really want to just draft these super efficient passing offenses. And I don't care if you're the number 1 receiver, the number 2 receiver, like that's who I want. That's why I have a guy like T. Higgins ranked so high. I want to be out in front of the market on T. Higgins. I have him at 13. And that's because, he had a higher target rate per route run than Jamar Chase did last year. So, when they were both on the field, T. Higgins was commanding a very high target share. And do I think that keeps up? Not necessarily. Chase entering year 2, it's really hard to, it's not, unthinkable to think he takes another step and just becomes a total dominator of the targets in that offense. But I think it's pretty clear that they're 1-2 punch, and it's kind of like Tyler Boyd, Uzuma, like those guys are not going to be nearly as involved. Like it's going to be very clear who the targets are going to in that offense with Joe Burrow. So I just think T. Higgins is just going to be a value because his ADP is never going to get to a point where it's so high because people are always going to have Jamar Chase ranked ahead of him. So it's just going to naturally cause T. Higgins' ADP to kind of stay at a level place where I think I'm going to really like scooping him up at value.
All right, fair enough there. Let's continue on with then Jalen Waddle here because I have Waddle higher than you. Just spoiler alert, we'll get to it later on in the show here. But why Waddle this far down after this first year? Is it just a matter of how you feel about Tua, how you feel about the offense? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's so different between him and Amon-Ra St. Brown in their production from the two guys?
It's fair. Well, one did it for almost an entire season as opposed to just the second half.
Well, the other one, I mean, St. Brown wasn't playing as a full-time starter till.
That's fair. That is fair. Well, but that's the difference.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's like if I'm going to take one of those guys, I would just take ASB because he's cheaper. Like he'll naturally be cheaper. But when you just look at the production, ASB was a wide receiver 1, during the last 6 weeks of the season. Waddle was always kind of teetering in that range because of the volume. And it just goes back to like, I just don't look, man, like what's happening in Miami right now is just, dude, I'm just very afraid to buy into what they're putting out there. And yes, they invested a 1st-round pick in Waddle. Yes, he's going to be on the field, but like, I still like don't know how good Tua is. And like, I'm very afraid that they don't know either. And they're just like, okay, let's get him his Alabama wide receiver. Like, see if this works. Like, I don't have a lot of confidence. The offensive line has been a big issue for them. And I just I didn't see the steps forward that I wanted to get from Tua in his second year. Like his first year coming off the hip injury, I was willing to look past some things for him as a rookie. But then this past year, it's just like, I just didn't see him progress enough that makes me feel confident that I want to look at Jalen Waddle as, a basically fringe wide receiver 1 when his routes were so limited, just being, used super close to the line of scrimmage, even though I know he has so much more potential for more. Like he can be used downfield. And I like Waddle the player, but I am kind of just a little nervous about the situation.
All right, fair enough there. Let's continue on here for Yates and your guys that you have in this grouping here because we get through the 18 through 13 grouping over on Kyle Yates's ranks. Kyle, take me through yours right now from 18 through 13. I want to hear your thoughts on those guys.
Yep. So I've got DK Metcalf at 18, which is definitely lower, but a lot of the same concerns there with Tyler Lockett, who's the quarterback for Seattle next year. Mike Evans at 17, Chris Godwin at 16, DeAndre Hopkins at 15, Hunter Renfrow all the way up at 14. I'm sure that we will talk about him. And then T. Higgins there at 13 as well.
All right. So who sticks out to you in this grouping here that you feel like has an opportunity to jump up a tier?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be interesting with Godwin to monitor where he ends up. Does he end up back in Tampa with potentially Kyle Trask as his quarterback, Blaine Gabbert? Do they go the veteran quarterback, the door number 2, as Bruce Arians says, or does he leave in free agency and he ends up in a much better spot? So I think with Godwin, it's really there as a placeholder for right now, particularly Godwin, not so much as Evans, because I think that we need to see a quarterback upgrade for Evans to move back up my rankings for next year. But with Godwin, he's kind of a placeholder, because if he ends up in a spot where they're going to feature him as potentially the wide receiver one, he's going to get a ton of targets, then he's going to be a guy that I rank as a top 12 player next year, assuming that he's back and fully healthy. So that's a major one there with Godwin that I'm kind of circling and saying I want to see what happens here with free agency to see where he ends up. Is he back in Tampa? But he definitely has the potential to move up a tier.
All right. I know this is almost an impossible question to ask, but in your opinion, what do you think happens with a quarterback situation in Tampa?
A lot has to be figured out there, right? They
Right?
have said that, they've got Kyle Trask that they drafted earlier than I think that they probably should have last year, who I liked coming out of Florida, but he's a limited player, right? He's not someone who's
Mhm.
suddenly going to jump up and be one of the guys that we discuss in the same territory as Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, any of those guys. So with Kyle Trask, he can execute the offense. I think he can be an accurate player, get it out to accurate passer, get it out to the playmakers, but really kind of limited from there. Blaine Gabbert, we've kind of seen what we need to see from Blaine Gabbert. We know that that's not going to be great. So unless they go with the veteran quarterback, unless they, make a splash, which they're kind of in a win now window with the team that
Mhm.
they've built. So did they go after Russell Wilson? Did they get involved in that? Aaron Rodgers, did they try to lure him away from Green Bay? What does that situation look like this offseason? Could drastically change it. So we got really two ends of the spectrum. Do they go the Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, or do they go the Kyle Trask route? And those can lead to very, very different levels of production from the wide receivers.
Now, you've got Hunter Renfrow at 14 here in the half point PPR rankings you've got right now. So you've got him higher than me and clearly higher than Andrew. So why is he that fringe wide receiver one for you? I mean, because basically in a deeper league, I mean, that's kind of where you have him ranked there. Is it just the consistency? Do you think he does enough potentially in this new offense they're going to bring in there with McDaniels, where maybe the touchdown equity goes up a little bit? Or was Renfrow? I mean, we had this conversation about Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? He was so great and Hawkinson was out. Well, Renfrow was pretty great, and Waller was hurt a lot this year. So, how much do you put in terms of stock of that?
Sure. So this is going to be the difference too. And Andrew brought up a great point of versus rankings right now and ADP, and where you're most likely going to have to draft Hunter Renfrow, you're most likely not going to have to draft him as a fringe wide receiver one.
Mhm.
So he could definitely take a tumble down as we start to get ADP and start to compare and contrast those. But with Renfrow, I'm looking at his production from this last year and the knowing the talent level, right? His ability to always get open. He's got the chemistry with Derek Carr to be a target machine. And then particularly you add in Josh McDaniels, and we know what the slot receiver does in the New England Josh McDaniels offense, right? Even Jacoby Myers this past year was soaking up targets. Now, he didn't get the touchdown totals, and that was this running thing with Jacoby Myers. But I think Hunter Renfrow has the ability to add on 6, 7 receiving touchdowns a year on top of what 130, 150 targets per, in a 17 game season. Like, I think that's very achievable for Hunter Renfrow in this offense. So if he's getting that type of target volume, which I think that he could, even with Waller on the field, unless they make a splash in free agency or in the draft and drafting another wide receiver, it's not going to be Brian Edwards. It's not going to be Zay Jones that suddenly steps up and takes a ton of targets. So it's going to be Hunter Renfrow. It's going to be Darren Waller. And I think that in this new offense with Josh McDaniels, he's going to be a target machine.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he's got that Edelman Welker kind of upside here. He's already kind of scratched the surface of that with McDaniels. If he brings anything close to that sort of offense in terms of mindset, this could be a huge year for Hunter Renfrow. I can sense already Andrew Erickson starting to bump him up his rankings right now. It's changing as we speak. All right, let's get to mine here. Number 18 for me is Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, 17, DJ Moore at 16. I'd love to put DJ Moore higher, but again, it's just a matter of I love the consistency, but what's the quarterback situation? None of us know. 15 is T. Higgins, and I love the value you're getting him there. DK Metcalf is at 14 for me, and Deontay Johnson at 13, which for me right now, it's just a matter of I love Deontay Johnson, a very good football player. I just want to see where things land with the quarterback situation. If it ends up being a good one, then I think Deontay Johnson could get back up into that top 12 conversation, maybe even top 10 potentially as well. But I think that's, again, right now it's a little too early to tell where we're going with that. All right, Andrew, let's take a look at your next grouping of rankings here. Let's go from 11 down to 6. You've got Keenan Allen at 11 here, Deontay Johnson at 10, then CeeDee Lamb, Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown, and Stephon Diggs. The first thing that pops out to me here is you've got Deebo Samuel outside of the top 5. Why is that?
Because I believe in regression. That's why.
Okay.
And it's it feels like a cop out to do it. But look, how much rushing production is he going to have next year? Like, who actually knows what's going to happen with his rushing production? He had like 7 rushing touchdowns this season, which I know that Yates does the projections, and it's like, Kyle, are you going to give him 7 rushing touchdowns? Like,
It's such an outlier.
it's really, really hard to project him moving forward, and then you pile in his injury history. Like, this dude has been banged up every single year of his NFL career. He was banged up at the college level. He's an older prospect. Like, I just think there's a lot of red flags with his profile. And if he stays healthy and that ultimately burns me, then so be it. But, as someone that likes to bet player props, I found that betting unders, a way to get bailed out is when guys get hurt. Like you get bailed out because guys get hurt. I'm not obviously wishing that upon Deebo Samuel or anything, but I'm just trying to be strict with my analysis here that because he offers this element of rushing, yeah, it obviously gives him a boost in terms of scoring, but it also makes him that much more fragile of an asset to own. And investing a second round pick in Deebo Samuel, knowing that this dude could literally have a game with 0 targets because he carries the ball like 15 times. Like, I don't know. Like, I just get I get the heebie-jeebies with that with Deebo Samuel, to be totally honest.
Well, the injuries are fair. I think that's a very fair assessment. Also, the usage, I thought that's where you were going to come at me with, which is I'm afraid of the usage. I'm afraid of the hybrid role. I'm afraid that he's going to touch the ball so much and the carries you're getting as opposed to the receptions you're getting take a far greater toll on a player who has an injury history. I thought that was the way you were going to come at me with the Deebo Samuel conversation, which I think is legitimate for anybody who wants to fade him. He's still a top 10 player. I don't think we can fade him out of the top 10, right, Andrew?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have him in the same, and a lot of my guys are tiered. So I have like a tier between, Allen and Diggs. So I view a lot of these players very closely together, and it'll come down to I'll probably just end up drafting whichever one of these players in this cluster fall to me the most. And I mean, like AJ Brown, I just think is an absolute monster. Like, he got hurt last year, but when he played, like, I'm taking AJ Brown over Deebo Samuel like 10 times out of 10. I just think that AJ Brown is the better actual wide receiver. He's the alpha in his offense. And look, I know Brandon Ayuk didn't fire like a lot of us thought he would, but I mean, when I was just watching that last game that he played against the Rams, like, he looks like a stud on the outside. Like, he does. And if Ayuk does take that leap that he just basically was not able to get out of the doghouse in the first half of the season, if we get a full season from Brandon Ayuk as opposed to a half season that we saw last year, how does that affect Deebo Samuel? Are his numbers are good? What happens if George Kittle stays healthy? Like, a lot of things worked in Deebo Samuel's favor last year, and just kind of projecting, like, copying, pasting everything he did last year and be like, all right, he'll just do it all again. Like, that's really hard to do. Playing into being the featured guy in that offense. And also, the biggest concern is quarterback change. Like, that's something that you cannot overlook. Like, when I was, quote unquote, fading Deebo this offseason, I was under the impression I thought Trey Lance was going to be the starting quarterback for the 49ers. Like, I literally thought that was going to happen. I thought that Trey Lance's rushing would eat away at Deebo Samuel's rushing production. So when they do more design runs, is that eating away from Deebo Samuel's touches or Elijah Mitchell? Like, those are things you need to ask yourself. And it's like, there's a lot of question marks about Deebo Samuel, and I'm taking this guy in the second round. Like, again, he could overcome these things, but I'm not sure if I'm willing to risk all of that on a guy when I could just take AJ Brown, locked and loaded stud in the second round, as opposed to a guy like Deebo. There's a lot of question marks for me.
All right, now Yates, you've got Deebo at 7, so I'm the only one of the three of us who has him in the top 5. And again, this is basically putting things on hold because we still don't know where Aaron Rodgers is going. We don't know a lot of the quarterback situations here. We'll have a little bit of clarity probably later in this month, but right now we don't have any. But do you kind of echo Andrew's sentiments about Deebo Samuel? Are you a little concerned, even though you probably have him ranked 2 spots higher? It's not much, but it's something. Do you feel like, yeah, you know what, all these things Andrew's saying absolutely should be taken into the equation?
They absolutely should. And with Deebo Samuel, one of the reasons why I was fading him, I think I had him like around wide receiver 33 coming into the year, was not just his ADOT, right? Remember that whole narrative? There was the ADOT from his 2020 season with an ADOT of 2.6 yards or whatever it was, but then also the injury history. And that was something where I was saying that's something that we need to be concerned about. And with Deebo, he managed to stay healthy for the majority of the year. We saw him get banged up here or there, but like, he managed to stay healthy and then produce ridiculous numbers with his talent level. But those are insane efficiency metrics. And so as you sit down to do projections, you have to stay balanced in your approach. There are guys who produce as outliers and they are just that talented where it stacks year over year. And then about like 2 years of a sample size, at that point, you can say, okay, I can start to get a little bit more generous with my rushing touchdowns that I'm giving to this player, or my receiving touchdowns, the yardage, whatever. But with Deebo Samuel, we don't have that larger sample size. We only have this past year. And then what happens next year with Trey Lance stepping in and Andrew mentioning the rushing totals? Trey Lance is going to take rushing volume away from this, away from Elijah Mitchell. If Deebo Samuel is continued to use as a running back, then Elijah Mitchell might not return value on where he's being drafted next year. Like Deebo Samuel might not return value. So there's a ton of questions, but yet with all that being taken into account, he's still a top 10 guy. This is still someone that has the talent to be that outlier, but you have to circle his name and say, there are some questions where there is the potential that I get burned by making this pick.
All right, fair enough. Let's go through your grouping 11 through 6. You've got Keenan Allen, just like Andrew Erickson does at 11. Then Jalen Waddle cracks the top 10. And then you've got CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, Stephon Diggs. Now, you've got CeeDee Lamb in the top 10. Andrew's got CeeDee Lamb in the top 10. I've got CeeDee Lamb in the top 10. So tell me, Yates, we just have to kind of grin and bear it, right? And just say, okay, it didn't work out exactly how we thought it might last year, but in 2022, we've got to go back to that well a second time.
The assumption with having CeeDee Lamb inside my top 10 is that Michael Gallup is going to leave in free agency and potentially Dalton Schultz as well. If that happens, then we're looking at Blake Jarwin as the starting tight end, and then it's Amari Cooper and it's CeeDee Lamb in this offense. So with that being taken into account, that's what leads to CeeDee Lamb being here as a top 10 play. Now, if they retain Dalton Schultz, he might move down a spot or two. If they bring in a free agent wide receiver, which I don't think they're going to have money to, but if they draft someone highly, whatever the case may be, then I will probably move CeeDee Lamb down to around the 15 range, but the talent level is still there. I think it was the consistent target opportunity with how many mouths there were to feed in this offense that wasn't as pass happy as we predicted coming into the year. We were looking back at 2020 and saying with CeeDee Lamb, remember when Dak was passing 54 times per game on average, whatever it was. Like that's what we could potentially, if we bring that down to 45 pass attempts per game with how pass happy they are, with how bad the defense is, then great, CeeDee Lamb is going to feast. There's enough volume for all three of these guys to be relevant. But then the issue is that the defense took a major step forward. They were more balanced on offense. They weren't as pass happy. So the target opportunity and volume wasn't there for CeeDee Lamb. Moving into next year, if we don't have those other options, CeeDee Lamb will have target opportunity, which will mean that with his talent level, he will produce as a top 10 play. So that's just the difference there, looking with CeeDee Lamb inside the top 10.
All right, let's continue on with these guys here in our top 10. I've got Jalen Waddle at 11, A.J. Brown at 10, Keenan Allen, then for me, CeeDee Lamb, Stephon Diggs, and Davante Adams. And I know that's controversial that I don't have Davante Adams in the top 5, but if Davante Adams gets franchise tagged and Jordan Love is the guy, I have a hard time getting top 5 with Davante Adams. So I understand this is February. It's the 2nd of February, in fact. It's Groundhog Day. So, I don't know if we're going to see our shadow and whether or not we're going to be able to get 6 more weeks of Aaron Rodgers playing quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. But I'm going to ask you this, guys. If that scenario does hold true, I know right now we're in a holding pattern. My pattern's just a little lower than yours. Yates, what does that do to Davante Adams? Let's give you that circumstance. Where do you rank him if indeed he has to play with the Packers there and Jordan Love, and that's the scenario that gets presented? Where's Davante?
Well, rewind to the beginning of this season in August, and we were having questions. We were ranking Davante Adams as if Aaron Rodgers wasn't going to play in Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
We were taking that into account, and I think around that point I had him at like wide receiver 10, wide receiver 12.
I was going to say, I remember being like 10, 11, 12-ish.
In that range, because you look at the rest of the offense. Who else is going to catch the ball? Like they've been making it work with, an MVS who has been streaky throughout his career, Allen Lazard, but that's been on the back of Aaron Rodgers being as good as he freaking is. So with Davante Adams, he's going to get target totals. Like he might even get more targets than what he has been previously. But the issue is that the touchdown production is going to come crashing down. He's not going to be as Aaron Rodgers, newsflash, Jordan Love is not going to be as efficient in the red zone and in the touchdown category as Aaron Rodgers has been. So yeah, I think with Davante Adams, we have to take that into account. If it is Jordan Love indeed, and right now, like you mentioned, holding pattern, I've got him at 4 right now, then we have to bump him down if it's going to be Jordan Love into that 10 to 12 range. He's still going to be a safe play. He's still got the talent, but he's just not going to score as many touchdowns.
Andrew, what's your 2 cents on that Adams scenario?
Yeah, I'd probably move him down to wide receiver 12. We do have a small sample size of Adams, playing more than one game without Aaron Rodgers back in 2017 with Brett Huntley for about half the season, and he was wide receiver 12 in fantasy points per game. So I think a question I want to ask you, Joe, is would you rather have Devontae Adams with Jordan Love / insert quarterback here, or Jalen Waddle?
That's a fascinating one. I
With
think
two,
I'd
you
rather
can
have.
you can be Tua. Tua can be
Um,
the quarterback.
yeah, well, I think I'm gonna take Jalen Waddle. Actually, to tell you the truth, I'm also gonna take him because he's younger, and I feel like that's another thing that we keep getting hit in the face with as a fantasy community, whether it be AJ Green, Julio Jones. It's one of the things where the DeAndre Hopkins, although I teased you about it earlier and gave you a hard time about it, he is starting to get up there and age up a little bit. And I think there's a certain thing where I start to look at these guys who've been in the league for 7, 8 years, and you start to go, well, I don't know how I feel about this scenario right now. Do I feel like this is a guy that I want to keep investing in? How long before he starts to fall off a little bit? I think I would go with Waddle because I just believe in that weekly productivity he's got. I think Adams might have some big ceiling games still. I think at the end of the year they might have similar stats in terms of total, but how they get there is going to be different. And I think I want the Waddle version of getting there because I like that points every week that I can count on. Does that make sense, Andrew?
Yeah, who do you think would be higher in ADP? Would it be
Oh, in
Waddle or would it be
ADP, I think it'll
Adams?
still be Adams based off name brand value. Don't you think so, Yates?
I think so. It'll be close with Waddle having as dominant of a first year as he did, but I do think that Adams will still be the guy.
Yeah, 100 catches is 100 catches. I mean, like 100 catches your rookie season. Just saying, like that's
And the
something that's
most
very.
catches ever by a
That's
rookie.
right,
Broke
most
the
catches
record.
ever for a rookie. Well, I mean, extra game, but
No, well, he missed the game too. Like that's the
oh,
thing.
that's right,
Like
he did
you
miss the
gotta you
game.
gotta
So
look at that too. Like people complain about the extra games.
that's
Like,
right.
oh well,
No, you're
he had
right.
an extra game that he could miss so that he could break the record. It's like that's stupid. Like he played 16 games, he broke the record. Like come on.
Yeah, it's not. It's how many games did you play, that's gonna be frustrating now for the next 10 years about comparing records and things like that till we all forget that they're. Oh yeah, that's right. Remember they used to be less games. Oh, it was so crazy. That was back when Tom Brady was playing quarterback.
Right,
All right,
exactly.
let's move on to the top dogs, the top five. I know this is what everybody wants to know, so we saved the best for last year. Andrew Erickson, your top five. Number five, you've got Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase at 4, then you got Devontae Adams up at 3, Cooper Kupp at 2, and Justin Jefferson at 1. You talk about quarterback play. Boy, oh boy, you must feel really good about Kirk Cousins because you got Jefferson at 1, which I understand completely. And I understand it's tough to repeat as the number one, and that's a road that Cooper Kupp's going to have ahead of him. So talk to me about this grouping. What was the thought process in the ranking of this top five?
Yeah, I really try to, when I'm looking at the top, I'm trying to figure out which guys are least likely to burn me. Like, I
Okay.
really feel like there's some semblance to not trying to like find the right guy, because if you were trying to find Cooper Kupp in the first round last year, he wasn't there. He was in the fifth round. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like that's what you need to lock and load the points. Like, you're not going to find the league winners in the first and second round. You find the guys that you know produce for you, and you just
Well, let me
can't.
pause you there because I got a question about that. So now that we've established him in Stafford, because that was the whole thing, was like, what's he going to be with Stafford? He's established himself with Stafford. Obviously, you have tons of respect for him. He's number 2, but why isn't he 1? Like, what is it that you just can't get him to that number 1 spot again after what he did this year, which was absolutely stunning? And this was the first year together.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not going to get better. Like he can't have more than a 32% target share again. Like it's literally impossible. Like
Challenge
it's not
accepted.
it's not going to happen. No, because again, Kyle Yates already talked about Robert Woods coming back for a full
Mhm.
season. I mean, does Odell Beckham Jr. come back to the offense? Like, what if he's involved? Now you have 3 really good wide receivers. It's going to be really hard for Cup to maintain that type of target share in the offense. The touchdown production was through the roof. I know that I like Cam Akers a lot. What if Cam Akers scores more touchdowns? Like that's a huge thing. Like the touchdown production Cup had was ultimately, obviously the targets gave him the super secure floor every single week, but the touchdown production was off the charts. Like the dude was literally scoring touchdowns his Super Bowl prop is that 1 touchdown. That's crazy to think that they're just expecting him to
Hey,
score.
his prop was 99 last week for yards.
Yeah,
and
it's
Bogman and I
absolutely
on the
ridiculous.
BP show went, well, that's an over. And it was the easiest over we could possibly have.
So I just think that every time we try to chase that legendary wide receiver season, whether it was Michael Thomas that one year where he broke the receptions record, he wasn't as good the next year. Like this happens all the time with these receivers because receiver is a more volatile position than running back is.
All right,
It just is.
here's my contradiction to that. Antonio Brown, year after year after year, he kept doing it. I mean, he was number 1 for what, a 3-4 year stretch there.
In
I
Pittsburgh.
mean,
In Pittsburgh, yes. Well, not in the
clarifying.
wherever he's going to play
Yeah, I
next.
was like-
Which I mean, the USFL might be calling pretty soon for him. But just saying, I mean, Antonio Brown had that kind of a run there for a couple years. He did.
But again, it's determining, is that an outlier? Is Antonio Brown repeating as the wide receiver one? You know,
it's fair.
Regardless of
It's a good
injury,
conversation.
like injury will derail that, like the statistics. But as far as like him repeating, is he truly an outlier? And I think that we have to at least acknowledge that there's a high potential that Antonio Brown doing what he did was an outlier. And now with Cooper Kupp, like I've got him at 1. And if we're ever going to take, it's kind of the Christian McCaffrey thing. It's like, if we're ever going to take a guy at number 1 overall, like is there a strong, do the numbers dictate that he is going to be the wide receiver 1 again at the end of the year? Most likely not. Like you're going to see someone else emerge, like the numbers kind of shift and move, but who else are you going to feel most comfortable taking there at the number 1 overall spot at the wide receiver position? Or, you know, I've got Justin Jefferson at 2. So it's like, it's flipping a coin. But with Cooper Kupp, if you're going to bet on anyone repeating as a wide receiver 1, it would be Cooper Kupp because of how dominant he was this year.
That's very eloquently put, Yates. I like exactly how you phrased that. I think you're 100% correct there in the way you're approaching it. So let's go through yours. You've got Tyreek Hill at 5. By the way, for the record, all 3 of us had Tyreek Hill at 5. We couldn't quite get past there, and we couldn't quite drop him past 5 either. Then you've got Devontae Adams at 4, Jamar Chase at 3, Jefferson at 2, and Cooper Kupp at 1. Now you've got Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson 2 and 3 respectively. Jefferson just ahead of Chase. So what is the mindset there for those 2 guys? Are they neck and neck, or is there a definitive break between Jefferson and Chase for you?
It's splitting hairs with any of the guys here in the top 5, and Devontae Adams, you know, being in the top 5 is, you know, just like we talked about earlier, that's kind of a placeholder with Aaron Rodgers potentially coming back, whatever the case may be. So splitting hairs with these guys. Tyreek Hill, kind of a bit more boom or bust this past year than I think a lot of people acknowledge, realize, you know, want to admit. So Hill going into next year, that's going to be an interesting case study to see how he bounces back, if he's more of a consistent option. But with Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, like if you want to make the argument like Andrew did to put any of those guys at number 1, I'm not going to fight you on it. Like Jamar Chase is still extremely young, and he's just getting started. Like he's not even anywhere close to his prime yet, and he just put up a ridiculous rookie season. So like the connection with Burrow can only continue to grow and develop even more than what it already is. So if you want to say that Jamar Chase is going to finish as the wide receiver 1 next year, I'm not going to be like, oh man, you're crazy. Like, yeah, there's a very good chance that it could be. So any of those guys, I think if you walk out of the first round, I think we're going to see the first round of drafts next year be a little bit more wide receiver heavy than what they have been in years past. And if you walk out of the first round with any of those top 3 guys, I think you're in a fantastic spot for your draft moving forward.
I think it's going to be a lot more wide receiver heavy, and I am going to be leading that charge. All the wide receivers in the first round. Let's go. Remember last year when I was taking Devontae Adams at 6 in those mocks, and you're like, what's your problem? Well, my problem is all the running backs keep getting hurt. By the way, 1,455 yards, 13 touchdowns, 81 receptions for Jamar Chase. That's a pretty good start, Yates. That's
Stupid.
It's a pretty damn good start, let me tell you. All right, for me, I got Tyreek Hill at 5, then Deebo Samuel at 4, because I think he's got one more of these years in him. I think he's got one more. I do. In dynasty leagues and keeper leagues, I think his value is at peak. I think everything Andrew said should be very much taken into account, and how durable and how much can he offer you in the next 2 to 3 year window. But for redraft leagues, I still think he's a top 5 guy. I think they're going to continue to ride this wave as Trey Lance starts to get up to speed with playing quarterback in the NFL. I think they're going to have to very much rely on Deebo Samuel. Justin Jefferson's 3 for me. I'm putting Jamar Chase at 2. I'm the only guy that's got Chase at 2. The highest on Chase, this guy right here, Joey P, and Cooper Kupp is still my 1 for the same reason that Yates said, which is if you're going to invest in a guy to finish as a top 5 wide receiver, it feels like at least that's the guy that's the safest investment. And this has been a very fun exercise. I have enjoyed this quite a bit. Andrew Erickson, what is your takeaway here from this assessment? Anybody that you heard an argument for, pro or con maybe, that you want to make an adjustment to? I'm on Ross St. Brown.
No, that's
sorry.
Hunter Renfro.
No, yeah,
Oh, yeah,
it's
Hunter
probably,
Renfro,
it's probably
too.
Hunter. It's probably Hunter Renfro that'll probably have to move up, but we're gonna see things shake out. You know, with free agency, with the NFL draft, things are going to move up and down the boards. I think that one thing that's important, something I want to focus on probably more during the offseason, is to not, really, harp on, all right, my Justin Jefferson or Cooper Kupp, number 1. Like, I need to do a whole analysis. It's like really like you're splitting hairs with a lot of these guys, because where Cooper Kupp, there's room for regression. you have room for growth with Justin Jefferson. Like, he didn't have 30% target share. What happens to Adam Thielen? Like you could see Justin Jefferson taking a step. Jamar Chase. I feel like I should raise him higher too, because every time I see him play, I'm just like, dude, I want this guy on my fantasy team. So it's like, if Kupp is going to go in front of those guys where he basically had one of the best wide receiver seasons ever in the history of the NFL, Chase and Jefferson have room to grow. Like, so that's like an argument I'm kind of thinking. But it's like, when we're talking about this next year, are we talking about, oh, well, Chase and Jefferson? Like, it was so clearly obvious. Like, Cooper Kupp couldn't keep it up. Like, things like that kind of come into my mind. And when we're talking about a year from now, like, how is this conversation going? Oh, well, OBJ came back. Oh, Robert Woods came back. Like, things like that are something like I just really want to consider. And it's like, it's so hard to fade like that special season, but it's like, it's special for a reason. Like, Randy Moss never caught over 20 touchdowns ever again. Like, because it's hard to do. And it's not because he still had Tom Brady. Like, he still had Matthew Stafford, so there's a lot of things like that. And to really focus more on that middle range, I don't want to draft Cooper Kupp.
Well, actually, if you recall, the next year, that was when Brady had the knee injury, was it not?
Okay, but he never caught more than 20 touchdowns ever with Brady again.
No, I know, but there was another year older and all that stuff. I'm just saying, what could have been that 1 year that Brady missed.
But I think that the edge is really looking in the middle rounds and being like, okay, Cooper Kupp was a guy you could get in round 4. Deebo Samuel was a guy you could get in round 6. Those were guys you could draft. Anybody could draft those guys. Who are those guys in 2022? Like, that's what I really want to focus on, because I think ultimately those are the guys that win your leagues, not necessarily at the top where, they're all good players at the top. Like, we were talking like these top 5 guys. You can't really go wrong with picking any of these receivers unless you pick running back, according to Joe. That's where you go wrong. You pick running back, and not wide receiver.
Oh man, wait till we get to August. I'm telling you, you're going to see me early quarterbacking all over the place. You're going to see me 2 wide receivers starts with the quarterback. Forget it. I'm out. I've had it. Enough is enough. It's time for a change. Yates, what was your big takeaway from this exercise today?
Kind of building on what Andrew said, it's the targeting those guys, the Cooper Kupps, the Deebo Samuels. If you remember, there was ambiguity with those respective situations. I liked Cooper Kupp, but I was higher on Robert Woods because I was taking that dart throw that Matthew Stafford was going to develop more chemistry with Robert Woods than Cooper Kupp. With Deebo Samuel, it was Brandon Ayuk had a dominant end of the year to 2020. Right. He was going to be this guy that was going to be the wide receiver 1. Deebo Samuel, ADOT, injury, everything. But you have to, at least in some spots, and this is kind of the benefit of playing in multiple leagues, is you get to, I'm guilty of this, where I get my guys and I just lock onto them. A lot of my fantasy teams across my 10 leagues, or however many I'm in, look so similar because I have my guys. And some of them pan out and some of them miss, and I have to deal with those misses. But I think one of the things that I'm going to be looking to do next year is to kind of shake things up and say, I'm going to target some of these guys that I normally wouldn't target, some of the guys that are in these ambiguous wide receiver cores, because it could lead to a Deebo Samuel. It could lead to a Cooper Kupp if everything breaks their way. So that's something that, I think you're definitely right, Andrew. It's taking those shots on those mid-round guys and seeing what can happen with those wide receiver cores.
Embrace the variance.
That's embrace the variance. There you go. Hashtag embrace the variance. For me, the big takeaway is, boy, oh boy, you guys need to get on the youth track here. Some really good young wide receivers here. You guys are missing out on the Moonies and the Moores. I mean, you gotta give a little bit more.
I got Elijah Moore at 22. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I know, but still not enough. Not enough love. I mean, come on, guys. You're supposed to be carrying this show and representing the youth, and here I am out there pushing for these younger guys. It's a young man's game in the NFL. Except for Tom Brady. It was Tom Brady's game all the time. He could be 100 years old and still play. But this is our first look ahead at the rankings. I'm sure we'll do about 30 or 40 more of these, but I think it's a great conversation. It's one of my favorite kind of shows to do, too. When you sit down with 2 smart people like Yates and Erickson, we kind of hammer this out and start to basically come up with our concept of what does the board look like going into next season. It helps you guys evaluate your dynasty leagues. It helps you guys evaluate your redraft keeper leagues, all kinds of things like that. And it'll love this. And because it's starting to turn the page and already start to look forward. And man, after this postseason that's been unbelievable with the NFL, I know some people are burnt out, not me. I can't wait to get back into it. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this show as much as I have today. And I want to remind all of you too, there's plenty of sports out there for you. DraftKings and FanDuel, both the amazing offers. So go head over to FanDuel.com/FPros right now. And again, a $5 bet on that Super Bowl. One of those teams playing can be at $280. And also download the DraftKings app right now, the DraftKings Sportsbook app, and use that as well. And don't forget also about our bettingpros.com/squares. If you're setting up Super Bowl squares this year, bettingpros.com/squares is the place to do it. It's free, it's efficient. You can see who's winning in each quarter, everything updates. It's easy to use, and it takes all the burden off of you, and you don't have to go to the local store to get one of those big giant boards and the big Sharpie markers. And no. We live in a digital age. There's got to be a better way, and we have it for you. bettingpros.com/squares. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Andrew Erickson and Kyle Yates, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.